The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet when the single father dropped to his knees at the grave, his hands trembling as if they no longer belonged to him. His shoulders shook, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet, exhausted sobs of a man who had already cried too much in life and still had no choice but to cry again. The headstone was simple, the name etched into it worn by time and touch, and beside him stood 3 small figures holding each other's sleeves, their eyes fixed on their father, as if they were afraid he might disappear into the earth along with the woman buried there. This is one of those stories that reminds us how fragile people can be, and how kindness sometimes appears in the most unexpected moments. So if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles of life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Ethan Walker had never imagined his life would shrink down to moments like this. Once he had dreams that stretched far beyond the gray cemetery gates. He had imagined growing old with his wife, Emma, watching their children grow, celebrating small victories and surviving small arguments, the ordinary magic of a normal life. But fate had other plans. Emma's illness came suddenly, cruelly, and left just as suddenly, leaving Ethan alone with their triplets, Noah, Lily, and Grace, who were barely old enough to understand why their mother stopped coming home. Since that day, Ethan's world had become a careful balancing act of survival. He worked long hours at a modest warehouse job, woke before sunrise to pack lunches, and fell asleep each night with exhaustion heavier than grief. Some days, he felt strong for his children. Other days, like this one, the weight of everything collapsed onto him without warning. The cemetery had become a place Ethan visited often, not because it healed him, but because it reminded him that his pain was real, that the life he lost had existed. The triplets stood nearby, too young to fully grasp death, but old enough to sense sadness. They noticed everything, how their father's eyes softened when he looked at the grave, how his voice went quiet, how the world seemed to slow down here. As Ethan rested his forehead against the cold stone, trying to breathe through the ache in his chest, a black luxury car rolled silently to a stop a few rows away. It looked out of place among the cracked paths and faded flowers. From the car stepped a tall, well-dressed man with silver-streaked hair and a presence that made people instinctively notice him. His suit was expensive, his posture confident, yet his face carried a heaviness that money could not hide. This was Alexander Reed, a billionaire known in business magazines for his ruthless intelligence and philanthropic gestures that rarely made emotional headlines. He walked slowly, holding a bouquet of white lilies, and stopped at a grave not far from Emma's. The triplets watched him with wide eyes, curious about this stranger, who seemed important and sad at the same time. They noticed how carefully he placed the flowers, how he lingered, and how his shoulders slumped when he finally turned away. Ethan barely noticed the man at first. His grief was too loud inside him. But as Alexander passed by, something subtle happened. He slowed his steps, his gaze falling on Ethan and the 3 children. There was recognition in his eyes, not of faces, but of pain. He had seen this kind of sorrow before, lived with it, carried it like a shadow. Alexander paused, said nothing, and continued walking, but the moment stayed with him. Behind him, the triplets leaned closer together, silently wondering why someone so rich, someone who seemed to have everything, would come to a place like this alone, carrying sadness instead of power. Life did not magically improve after that day. Ethan still struggled. Bills piled up. The roof leaked during heavy rain. Some nights dinner was whatever he could afford that week, but small shifts began to happen, almost unnoticed at first. A letter arrived offering unexpected financial assistance from a private foundation. The warehouse supervisor suddenly became more flexible with Ethan's hours. A school counselor reached out, offering extra support for the children. Ethan accepted these changes cautiously, afraid to hope too much, yet grateful in ways he could not fully express. Weeks later, Ethan learned that the assistance came from the Reed Foundation. Alexander Reed had quietly looked into Ethan's life after that day at the cemetery. He saw a man who was not asking for help, not begging the world for sympathy, just trying to hold his family together with tired hands and stubborn love. Alexander knew this struggle intimately. Years earlier, he had lost his own family in a tragic accident, and his wealth had done nothing to save them. Helping others had become his way of staying connected to humanity, of honoring the love he lost. The triplets began to feel the changes too. Their home felt warmer, safer. Ethan smiled more often, even if the sadness never fully left his eyes. One afternoon, they returned to the cemetery together, carrying fresh flowers they had picked themselves. As Ethan stood quietly, remembering Emma, he noticed the same black car parked nearby again. Alexander was there, once more paying his respects. This time, he approached Ethan, not as a billionaire, not as a savior, but as another human being shaped by loss. No grand speeches were needed. The understanding between them was enough. From that day on, their lives became gently intertwined. Alexander never tried to replace what Ethan had lost, but he offered guidance, support, and opportunities that allowed Ethan to breathe again. The children grew up knowing that kindness could come from strangers, that compassion did not always announce itself loudly, and that even the most powerful people could carry invisible wounds. Ethan learned that accepting help was not weakness, and that honoring Emma's memory did not mean living in constant pain. Years later, as the triplets stood taller and stronger beside their father, the cemetery visits felt different. There was still sadness, but there was also gratitude. Gratitude for the love they had, for the people who stepped in when they needed it most, and for the reminder that even in the darkest moments, life could still offer unexpected light. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness matters and that hope can grow even in grief, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe, because your support helps keep stories like this alive. And before the ending, we have a small request for you. Please comment below and tell us what part of this story moved you the most, because your words mean more than you know. In the end, Ethan understood something profound as he looked at his children laughing softly among the graves. Pain does not disappear, and loss never truly leaves, but love finds ways to continue, often through the hands of strangers who see your tears and choose not to look away.